Oakwood did not start as a major theme park, but under the MacNamara family, it took big risks, installed large rides, and tried to put itself on the map. This was the era that defined Oakwood. Right, so obviously, like I say, when the park opened in 1987, it was not a major theme park. In fact, it was trying to turn some farmland into a leisure attraction. And the first thing you did was you parked up outside and you got on this little narrow gauge train that took you into the park. Now, from what I can see from the pictures and footage that I found, there were plenty of trains to choose from. And to begin with, it lent heavily into outdoor attractions. In fact, one of the earlier attractions was a BMX bike attraction. Now, I can't find any photographs specifically from Oakwood, but I did find some pictures of some kids in the 80s on their BMX. So I imagine this is probably what it looked like. Another thing they had was a large wooden fort. It's a climbing frame kind of thing. Again, very difficult to find footage from this far back, but I did find one image on Facebook, which I believe is off this attraction. So yeah, if I've got that wrong, please let me know, and I'd love to see some more photos from this era. Right, so the next thing they've got, and this was pretty common for most parks at this sort of time frame, was their 3D cinema or Cine 180 kind of thing. Basically, it was an indoor, a sort of a dome with a big screen inside it that played various different movies. And I think by today's standards, nobody would be impressed by this. But the footage I found, there are people screaming because it's simulating being on a roller coaster, and I think there's one with a truck and stuff. People clearly felt this was realistic back in the 80s. How far attractions have come in the last few decades, huh? Right, there was one attraction that opening year that was a little bit more exhilarating than the rest, and that was that they had two sets of go-karts, a junior set and then the more grown-up set. Now, I did find some footage of the go-karts. I think it is the larger version of it. At least it didn't look particularly small, so I don't think it was a junior set. But again, if anyone has any footage of that other smaller go-karts, I'd love to see it. And the last two attractions that I can find that were there at opening day was, first of all, was their bobsleigh. You've probably seen these in a few places, sort of the kind of metal track that you kind of go down in the little tea tray, basically. And then the other one was waterfall. Now, just for transparency, I've never went to Oakwood. I'm one of those people that was like, oh yeah, I'll go next year. And then I didn't, so I'm absolutely gutted. But I have seen this waterfall numerous times. And basically, it's two rather steep slides. You go down on a little mat, and there is a significant amount of water at the bottom of this. Now, if you get it right, you skim that water like a stone. Get it wrong, well, this happens. Right, so moving on to 1988, a little bit of a quieter year when the park had just opened at this point. They did introduce a dark ride known as Nutty Jake's Gold Mine. I mean, the clue's in the name, you went through a gold mine. I did find footage of this, and I can't tell if this was insanely dark or if cameras were just terrible in the late 80s, because you can barely see a damn thing. However, there is one little cheeky scene, quite literally, just when you've left the station before you go into the ride. Right, moving on to 1989, and this was when the park got their first roller coaster. Now, it was a Tree Tops coaster. Nothing spectacular, a family, probably more kiddie ride, to be honest, sort of borderline family kids. As far as I can tell, nothing really changed in this attraction in terms of the experience, the theming, etc. But I did find 3 different signs for outside the ride. So they didn't change its name, they didn't change the ride experience, but they did keep putting a new sign up. So, also in 1989, I did find a clip from Wish You Were Here.
But first, with Easter around the corner, how about some ideas for days out at Britain's theme parks? We've been looking at some of the best of them. At Oakwood Adventure Park, near Tenby, the theme is none too conspicuous. The MacNamara family were originally dairy farmers. With the introduction of EEC milk quotas, their production was cut drastically, and without any previous experience, they decided to enter the tourism and leisure industry with this £3 million project. Opened in 1987 on an 80-acre site, it now draws 250,000 visitors a year, adding new attractions each season. A train takes you through woodland to the site. There, the emphasis is on family fun, which means there are no really scary white-knuckle rides. Smaller children enjoy Playland, an undercover adventure area with climbs and swings, while older ones go for the assault course out in the open.
Right, moving on to 1991, and there was a couple of attractions added. Now, the first one was a pirate boat. Fairly standard, like a pirate boat. They got one. The other thing was Jaketown, and this had Nutty Jake's Music Hall, which was a puppet show, kind of interesting puppet show, because it was one of those ones where you see the guy's hands. So it's not puppet in the traditional, like, I'm inside the puppet controlling it. It's like there is the puppet and then there's hands. So the guy's playing the guitar and doing all these kind of things.
Well, I reckon it's about time for a little bit of class to be brought to the show, and I know just the veteran to do it. Me!
I did see some construction photos of this, so I'll probably put those on screen right now, and a picture of the MacNamara family outside when it was complete. This also seems to be the year that the kind of entrance to the park was kind of given a little bit of a spruce up with kind of new signage and stuff and showing you what attractions were open for the day. So 1992 saw the introduction of some more kids rides. The first one was Aeroplane, which, I mean, the name says it all. It's small aeroplanes on a kind of rotating ride. The other thing they got was a Zamperla tracked ride. Now, initially everything I saw said London taxi ride, London sightseeing, etc. I think it's the same attraction, and please correct me if I am wrong on this one, but I found a leaflet from 1992 that initially when this opened, it was the truckers ride. So pretty sure the same vehicles were rethemed into those taxis later on, but it certainly didn't start as that London ride. It was all about trucks. Right, 1994 in the UK is known as the year of the coaster. We got Nemesis, we got the big one, and Drayton Manor put in Shockwave. Well, Oakwood decided they were going in a completely different direction. They put in some water slides with Snake River Falls. There's 4 slides. 2 of them were enclosed, 2 of them were open. But this was more about kind of like a family experience and less about thrills. I did find a newspaper article kind of promoting the arrival of this ride. I actually also found an advert, which kind of just shows you how they expected this ride to be received.
Snake River Falls at Oakwood.
No sweat.
As described by Dave, aged 14.
Well, you get in this little boat and then you...
So, how was it, Dave?
Well, I thought it was.
Snake River Falls, ride it once, but would you ride it twice?
Right, so 1995 brought another one of those tracked attractions. This time it was known as Neverland Chase. Now, I did find some sort of images inside the queue line with sort of quotes, presumably quotes from Peter Pan. That kind of would make sense. I did also find a POV of this attraction. Now, the first part of it, no theming. I mean, unless a fence counts as theming. There is a little bit later on, but yeah. Also found another advert from the park.
What you gonna do with £7.45, Dave?
No sweat. My dad. Get out the way, you idiot!
So, how was it, Dave?
Well, I paid once, then all the rides were free.
Oakwood, for families!
Right, 1996 was definitely a defining year for Oakwood because they introduced Megaphobia. Now, this was largely regarded as one of the best wooden coasters in the UK, and I personally am gutted that I never got to experience this one. Now, it was built by Custom Coasters International, and it was designed by the legendary John Wardley, so you knew it was going to be good. And now in the early years, Megaphobia appeared in the Golden Ticket Awards many, many times. Didn't get the top spot, but it was in that top 10. Now, what makes it kind of special, though, is its setting. How many coasters can you think of that have sheep grazing at the bottom of it? There is one chap who many of you may be aware of. He's certainly synonymous with this park, and in particular this attraction, and that is Mark Lewis, or Mark Megaphobia Lewis, who rode the ride over 5,000 times. Now, I reached out to Mark, and he has sent me a little clip with some of his memories of the ride.
Hi guys, it's Mark Megaphobia Lewis here. I've been asked by the Coaster Dad to say a few words about my passion for Megaphobia. When it was announced in 1995 that they were going to be building a full-scale wooden roller coaster in my local park, as you can imagine, I was over the moon. Once the ride was actually completed, myself and a few other members from the roller coaster club were lucky enough to be one of the first ever to ride it. Opening day 1996, April the 30th, we were all there for the first public rides, and I was absolutely just hooked straight away. Like I said, it's been a big part of my life. It wasn't just about the ride, it was about somewhere to go, like when, you know, times are hard, and, you know, we all struggle some days, and it was just a great place for me to be, you know. It was a bit of sweet end, really. The last ride I ever took on Megaphobia was the very last ride of 2024, and it was with my granddaughter Mia, and that was Mia's very first ride on it, and for now, obviously, I'm assuming it's going to be her last. You don't just want to go out there and support the big parks, you need to go out and support the small ones as well. And that's just remember this, real roller coasters are made of wood.
I found a couple of adverts from this year, one of them specifically advertising Megaphobia, and it's a little bit strange. And then the second one was a kind of broader park-based advert, which was also a little bit strange. It kind of featured this old lady that was a little bit uptight until she got to the park and got on all the rides.
It takes a lot to get my Gran going. I told her, Gran, you've won the lottery. Nothing. Gran, the Chippendales are at the door. Not a sausage. Gran, we're off to Oakwood. This is embarrassing. My Gran, once she gets going, there's no stopping her. Whoa! Megaphobia! Gran, don't even think about it.
Another thing that the park was well known for, and again, gutted I did not experience, was Oakwood After Dark. I think most people really appreciate a theme park when it is lit up in the evening. Now, obviously in the summer that's a lot harder here in the UK, but it doesn't get dark till 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night. But certainly when it can get dark earlier, these parks are just fantastic. And the Oakwood After Dark was very well received. Obviously things were lit up, they had fireworks spectaculars, they had kind of entertainment, etc. So definitely an experience. Right, there's not a huge number of attractions that I will not go on. But in 1997 they did add one that there was no chance you were getting me on. And that was called Vertigo. Now it's a sky coaster, it was 164 foot tall, and it was an upcharge, it wasn't included in your park ticket. You know, this is the one where, you know, you get in that sleeping bag and then they drag you all the way up and then you swing. Yeah. Maybe one day, but right now that is not an attraction I am interested in the slightest. Right, the other thing that came this year was a small Pinfari coaster. A little kids coaster known as the Circus Clown. Now in the next episode I will cover what has happened to the majority of these attractions, because I'm sure you are aware the park is now empty. Pretty much everything has been gutted. This particular one, however, ended up in Camel Creek Adventure Park. I found a couple of newspaper articles for their winter events. And the first one was talking about their Panto Aladdin. And actually quite impressively, they were hoping to beat the previous year's 15,000 guests. That's a reasonable, decent number for Panto in a little park, especially considering this park was still pretty much in its infancy at this point. And, well, it was a very difficult park to get to, so that is quite impressive. The other one I found was competition for their winter event. And I know these competitions are never complicated, like they basically just want you to do something to participate. But basically the question was, how many designers were involved in something? The answer is right next to it. So the question is here, the answer is there. Surely nobody got this wrong. Right, 1999 brought another big attraction in the form of Bounce. Now, I found some articles claiming this to be the UK's first free fall tower coaster. Got some issues with that. I wouldn't say this was a coaster by any stretch of the imagination, and although it's a different ride manufacturer and model, we had PlayStation at Blackpool a couple of years before, so kinda not really the UK's first, but as I say, different model, different manufacturer, so bit of a stretch. I did find some articles. I found a competition that you could be one of the first people to ride this. I'll put it up on screen right now. Let me know if you got the answers to these questions. They also, for opening this, decided, given the name was Bounce, that they wanted to get a number of actual bouncers to come and ride the ride for its opening. So that was kind of a nice little unique approach. I did find an image. Now, I don't know, this image is clearly a joke. What I can't tell though is, was it an actual joke in the park just to wind guests up? Or is this just a digital joke that was put online? So if you know, please let me know. But basically found this image that said that based on the handles, if you squeeze one handle, it will shoot first and then drop later. If you squeeze the other one, it will drop first and then shoot you later. Clearly fictitious and didn't do that. But as I say, I do wonder if this was a joke the park made and the sign existed, or if this is just some clever clogs went online and put it on Facebook. So let me know. The other thing I've got about this ride now, in the next episode, we'll cover a chap who many of you will know, especially if you know Blackpool Pleasure Beach, and that is Andy Highgate. Now, he used to work at this park. Clearly not at this point, as I say, he comes along in the next episode, but I did find an image of him with the guests on bounce, having a bit of a laugh with a hose. Right, 2000 brought another dark ride, and I think, from what I can tell, quite literally, in all senses of the word, because I found some pictures of it, of the interior, and it looks kind of terrifying. But I also found a POV, which, again, I'm not sure if cameras were just terrible at this point, or if it genuinely was pitch black, because you can't see very much. Now, the ride didn't last very long. We'll get onto that in a minute, so yeah, I'll tell you what happened. But to tie in with the new spooky ride, they launched their Halloween event, Eerie Evenings. Sounds like that didn't last very long either. Right, so 2001, that goldmine ride that we talked about a few years ago, that got rethemed into Brer Rabbit's Burrow. I found a POV of this one, showing it in its full glory, and it looks okay. Well, I also found some images of it in its current state, and it is pretty grim. So, 2002, we saw the addition of one ride and the removal of another. The ride that left the park was the go-karts, which had been there since the very beginning. The ride that was added was Hydro. Now, this was Intamin Shoot the Shoot ride. We're going to cover this one a little bit more, and I'm sure many of you know exactly why, but just bear in mind that at this point, the attraction only had a lap bar. Now, it had an 85-degree drop, and it reached 80 kilometers or 50 miles an hour, which is quite something for a boat ride. Right, 2003, and that dark ride that we mentioned only a few minutes ago, that I said didn't last, well, it got rethemed from Voodoo Mansion into Spooky 3D. Now, this POV that I found of this definitely looks significantly better. And I'm pretty sure that is the attraction itself, not just the camera quality, but it is a lot more vibrant and a lot more bright. And apparently it had 3D ultraviolet effects. Now, what I can't tell, and please let me know in the comments, is, was this just some clever painting that made things look 3D, or did you actually have to wear those daft glasses? Right, 2004 was both a quiet year and a kind of big year for the park. And it was quiet because from a ride lineup point of view, they only added one small attraction known as Plane Crazy. Now, this is a flying scooter ride, and when I was over in the US, I saw plenty of these, and I did not realise that they existed in the UK, had never seen them before. But clearly there was one at Oakwood. Now, I did find an image of the Roller Coaster Club of Great Britain dressed up for the ride's opening day. However, as I said, this was also a big year for the park, and not in a positive way, unfortunately, because this had the first tragic death of a guest. So that ride we talked about recently, Hydro, unfortunately, a young girl was ejected from the ride and lost her life. Now, it was later discovered from CCTV that the staff did not check the restraints properly, which is kind of a little bit terrifying. The ride returned in 2005 with a new name, this time known as Drenched, and new boat designs. So I mentioned earlier that initially it just had a simple lap bar. Well, after that accident, it was refitted to have over-the-shoulder restraints. Right, so moving on to 2006, the park saw another major investment. This time it was with the Speed No Limits. Now, this is a Gerstlauer Eurofighter. I typically am not a massive fan of Gerstlauer. I have experienced some good Gerstlauers, and I never got on this one, so I don't know how good this attraction was. I've seen a couple of conflicting records, and I don't know if it held both or if it's just some confusion online, because definitely one said at the time of opening it was the steepest drop, which it was later lost to multiple rides, Mumbo Jumbo being one of them, and others after that. But I also saw a claim that it was the tallest Eurofighter at the point when it opened. So I'm not sure if that one is true or not. But in any case, this was one of their bigger attractions, that kind of vertical lift hill, and it was a decent layout. Now, again, we will cover this in the next episode, but, well, it's been removed and it is off to a new home. Right, so that was the formative years of Oakwood, and in the next episode we will cover after it changes ownership. But if you've got any memories from this era, please let me know in the comments. Make sure you subscribe for the next episode, and as always, I've been Chris, you've been watching Coaster Dad, and I'll see you in that next episode. Adios!